Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Tyler Pigott. Tyler is a growth strategist and brand messaging expert at StoryBrand. He bootstrapped and scaled his own agency, ran over 300 StoryBrand workshops, and now leads revenue at StoryBrand while building the agency builders community. I wanted to have Tyler on because he brings these hard-won insights on how constraints and clarity help agencies scale more effectively. In this episode, we discuss using constraints to boost creative problem solving, how to apply StoryBrand without sounding formulaic, the one clarity shift that unlocks agency growth, and more. No one was asking for another community, but I've made one anyway. So what's different? The dynamic agency community is designed around access rather than content. Access to peers who've done it before. Access to experts who've designed solutions. Access to resources that have been battle tested. And right now, the price for founding members is only $97 a year. Join today so your agency has immediate access to everything you need to grow. You can join at dynamicagency.community. And now, Tyler Pigott. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. How did your experience bootstrapping businesses now shape your approach to agency growth?
That's a good question. I've done a lot of different startups in my life and kind of built stuff from scratch. I think one of my favorite things is the 0 to 1 mentality. There's books out there on it, all that kind of stuff, but that's probably where I thrive. Give me a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, and then I'll go, create whatever. And I think there's something about like capital constraints, like allowing influence and like a lot of creativity, right? Of like, how do you accomplish something when you don't have what you need or whatever? And I've found that many businesses, as they, I think the trap that lots of people fall into, and one of the hardest things I would say in business to do, is to keep your business lean as you grow. Because most people just take the resource they've made, money they've made, whatever it is, and just grow and just kind of throw money at problems. And we all know that doesn't always fix the problem, but you can kind of check the box next to the fact that you feel like it did. And so I think for me, just growing the agency from the beginning and just kind of being real scrappy, and kind of it allows you to, it requires you to be scrappy and focused, because if you're not, you're, spread real thin. And when you don't have like the cushion, every decision matters a ton, especially around your team and the offer that you have, and your positioning and problem you're focused on. And it really just, I don't know, I feel like it forces you to prioritize like clarity, return on your investment. And investment could be whatever resource you're throwing at it. It could be time, it could be money, it could be, just whatever you're leaning into, you've got to make sure that there's like a return on that. So I don't know, I feel like it's like that mindset still drives how I help agencies grow even today, and how I help, different organizations grow today after agency land kind of wrapped up a little bit for me, but, leaning into what works and, cutting what doesn't. So,
I want to go deeper into your thoughts on constraints. Because so constraints are awesome. I'm a proud supporter, but I've looked at a couple buckets for how we can put constraint. You have governing constraints and then enabling constraints. Which is governing constraint, like lines on a road. As long as everybody follows the lines on the road, we're going to get where we're going faster. We're good. Everybody's safer. We win. Enabling constraints being like other criteria we're going to put on top to kind of force our hand to make ourselves think like more creatively or in different ways about problems. Whether it's budgets, time deadlines, like things that we're going to set up. I guess, how are you looking at constraint? Like what types of things do you look to implement within the companies you're working with?
Well, one of the things that like was of huge, influence for me, a number of years ago, they came out with a study called the Playground Study. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. I don't even know how widely, it
might be. We'll see which direction it goes.
So they took, a school, and then paraphrase it down. There's pages of data on it and everything, but they basically took two different schools, and kids that were in that school, they let kids out for recess. And at one of the schools, the kids really kind of stayed pretty huddled around like the big toy and the, teachers that were out there, and it was like, they'd play and it was fun. And then the other school, they, bell rang for recess, and the kids just like ran out. They ran out. They were all the fields. They were all over the place.
Mhm.
And the kind of main key factor that was different between the two schools that did it was one had a fence that was the boundary of the recess kind of or
Mhm.
playground, and one did not. And so I think one of the things that led me, and just was a great visual for how my brain thinks
Mhm.
around when I know where the boundary is, man, I'm going to just have a lot of fun in that boundary and figure out what that is. And so I'd
Mhm.
almost kind of put that boundary as the same thing as a constraint, going, hey, I actually do like when working with a sales team and you have to have a quota, or working with having to hit a certain budget number or whatever. Like, it
Mhm.
just makes you focus and kind of go, okay, I've got my playground now. How can I maximize what's inside these kind of playground? And so
Right.
for me, it just was that really good visual of like many people, especially when you work in agency land and branding and marketing and kind of with creatives. Reality is that creatives, I believe, they're creative problem solvers. And so it might be in
Mhm.
the format of design or copywriting or strategy or whatever. But oftentimes creatives, kind of like when you put constraints in or even say the word constraints or boundaries or process or system, they kind of like hairs on the back of their head stand up and
Right.
people freak out, and but I actually
Mhm.
really love like the idea of that playground, and kind of go, well, you need to have like boundaries, you need to have those constraints to be able to have maximum creativity within those, so that you're not really thinking about anything else, but it's your brain's fully
Yeah.
focused on that kind of space. So I oftentimes I'm looking for those. To answer your question a little more directly, I'm looking for those, working with organizations now, of what are the constraints. There is an
Mhm.
element where I love brands that really do have a focus. And so that could be a horizontal focus of services they offer, could be a vertical focus of industries they work with or
Mhm.
whatnot. But that almost provides that constraint of, it's not one thing to everything, or one thing to everybody, but it's, oh, I work with this industry,
Mhm.
or I provide this specific service, or I have this problem that I solve for this specific audience. So that is a constraint, and I actually really like that constraint. Sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it means you have to turn down business or whatever, but
Mhm.
you do have like those boundaries, if that makes sense, or those guardrails that kind of you try to stay
Right.
between. So
For someone who doesn't feel like they have enough constraints or they want to try playing with some other systems, I guess, for creating
yeah,
these, what would you recommend?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the two things that come to mind are the visualization of guardrails. So you've got like lanes on a highway, but then there's guardrails when something's like kind of wild. And so
Right.
I just always like to reference, if people have like little kids and they back to playground land, they go to a park or whatever.
Mhm.
I really, as a parent, loved when my kids just got to play in a park, and I generally tried to let them kind of do their own thing. But the minute that they started to run for the road where something was dangerous, I'm like jumping in.
Mhm.
And so I use that example specifically to go, okay, so what are those like for in a business or in a service offering or whatever it is, like in the organization that you're in? What are the things that, how do you differentiate between, what are the things that you kind of let in this like loose guardrail versus, hey, these are like, can't do this, or can't, have to do this kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I feel like one of the things, and the reason I say that is because oftentimes when people talk about constraints, they want to apply the same mental energy of constraints towards everything. And I
Mhm.
don't believe that that's really necessary, because not
Right.
everything is kind of like life or death, or, I use that, park analogy of
Yeah.
running around, hanging out with other kids, playing tag, whatever it is very safe, even though, yeah, you could fall over and skin your knee, versus running
Mhm.
into the street and getting hit by a car. Those are different scenarios, And so
Mhm.
that concept of really taking the time to like outline, well, what are the constraints that are, hey, I can't do this, or I can do this, or I have to stay away from that, versus the other things that are a little bit more fluid or flexible. So
Yeah.
that's where I would start with. And I use T charts all the time. It's, top line, middle down, a line down the
Mhm.
middle, ones on each side, and kind of like playing out what those types of things look like. I love setting budgets. Budgets
Mhm.
are one of the first thing that I'll go for, because of the fact that oftentimes people freak out about budgets. But if you don't have a budget, you have no idea if you're spending great, saving money great,
Right.
within your realm, that kind of stuff. Those are
Mhm.
really easy to implement. I with creatives or marketing or branding agencies, I love setting a cap on rounds of revisions internally.
Mhm.
And it sounds funny, but there's also like, well, if you don't have them, then how do you, I mean, going back and forth with the client 28 times usually means you're going to lose money on the project. And
Yeah.
so how do you kind of have some constraints? So some of those are just low hanging fruit type opportunities,
Mhm.
but even just writing them down and establishing them, I believe is just a helpful, like, oh, I can see it. I know if I'm, what success look like, if you will, kind of doing
Right.
a certain thing. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. I like that. And the added layer of like what level of risk are you willing to assume
yeah.
for some of these is huge. Like it adds another layer to all of your decision making process, but it could be what saves your agency. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think with constraints, a lot of times my brain's like a big like reverse engineer. So it's kind of like that, hey, you don't know how to run a long distance, sign up for a marathon, work your way backwards.
figure it out.
Yeah, in a little
Yeah.
bit, and so I think
Mhm.
about like, well, I don't want to have a budget, my business, I think that's dumb, whatever. Okay, cool. Well, you don't have an unlimited amount of money. So if your
Mhm.
end result is this and this is what you have to make or can't spend, work backwards from it and what does that look like? And you kind of, that's how you really do have success towards going towards some of those goals, and having like those, ceilings that you run into or guardrails that you can't go over,
Mhm.
or those types of things. So
Yeah, I mean that thinking also kind of forces agencies in the idea of like running more deliberate like tests, I
yeah,
guess, where it's like if you just have an open budget, right, and you can do everything, yeah,
yeah,
you might be able to get some of these results. But when you go to replicate them later, and maybe now you do have a budget, you're like,
yeah,
you don't know that this is going to fail because you didn't have these constraints before.
yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, I think even if it's making up the constraint, like putting a fake number in there, just say we got to try hitting it with this,
totally.
is only going to benefit you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Like outlining what that, like a scorecard or whatever you want to call it. But like,
mhm,
if you're testing something, what does the test look like? How long are you running it? What does success look like? What does failure look like? And people run away from the word failure or success, but you're also like, well, what made it win or not win? Or,
right.
everybody wants to win. So you're like, cool,
Mhm,
but that oftentimes mean you're not going to win in a lot of scenarios to get to the fact that you would, and so
mhm,
I feel like it's just such a great exercise to go down, go through and go, what would I look at whatever I'm doing right now as a failure or as a,
mhm.
man, I just missed.
Yep.
What's that either number or what's that thing you're measuring it by? And I think that
Right.
acts as a constraint a little bit of, well, I need to make sure I don't
Mhm.
hit that, and I just think it's a powerful, I guess, mindset in some ways for some
Yeah.
people.
Well, and definitely, because then you can, if it either a test comes back inconclusive or as
Yeah,
like a failed hypothesis, then it's much easier to now try run a new test with that new information and say, okay,
sure.
well, we know this failed because of this reasons, and
Yeah.
like with we need more budget, right?
Yeah.
We actually have to expand some of these constraints, otherwise we can't do this.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the
So
MVP. I'm a huge like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 version,
yep.
of things
Yeah.
versus waiting until it's like there's, I'll butcher the saying, but I love the idea of my, half baked product that I launched is so much better than your perfect product that you never launched.
Hmm.
And you're just kind of like, well, it's going to get better over time. And it's going to do that anyway, even if you
Yep.
wait to launch something or wait to do something until it's quote unquote perfect. But so you might as well just kind of like get it out
Yeah.
there, start improving. But to your point, if you aren't really measuring, some
Mhm.
different kind of things on a scorecard, whatever you want to call it, you have no idea what the next version should look like or what you're comparing it against or what like the new baseline kind of
Mhm.
concept is. So
I was having a conversation with someone the other day about how all marketing is essentially a guess,
mm,
right? And it's we take our best guess because
yeah,
we've seen patterns, we do these things, but like we're guessing.
yeah, 100%.
And hopefully, like by someone working with an agency, right, they're able to shortcut some of that guessing because they're getting
Yeah,
there a lot faster. But really, the way we figure out if this works is if the market likes it or they
yeah,
don't like it, right?
yeah,
They're the ones deciding. But yeah, if you're not measuring, even if it's a guess, you should be measuring what you think is going to happen so
yeah.
that you can model this. So,
Yeah, I mean that's the reason people hire agencies is it's
mhm,
you've done this whatever tactical
mhm,
thing, strategy thing so many times, and me as a marketer over here, CMO, whatever it is, I've launched whatever 2 brands and you've launched
mhm,
102 brands.
right.
You've
In the same
learned
amount
more
of time.
yeah, totally. Exactly, right.
Right.
And you've just learned more because you've had more reps in that, you've done more kind of 0 to 10 type things. And so
Mhm.
that's why people hire agencies, or at least in my opinion why they should hire agencies
Yeah.
is because they're trying to like cut like I always used to tell prospects when I was on, on calls of like, we're here to help you fall on your face at least one less time than we have, kind of concept. And usually that, you're getting there faster or you're helping them get there faster. So,
Right. So I want to shift
yeah.
focus a bit to some StoryBrand stuff.
Okay.
Because surprisingly, we actually haven't talked about StoryBrand a lot on this podcast.
Love it.
So what are some of the like common messaging mistakes that you're seeing with founders going into their branding?
I mean, the most common mistake that I see that like 100% of the time almost is that people talk about themselves first, and they don't talk about a problem, or they talk about something general, but they don't talk about like an outcome or a solution or a problem that prospect buys. I mean, literally all of us, I can't think of a single thing I've purchased in the last whatever amount of time that's not to solve a problem. It might be a stupid problem, it might be something that's like luxurious or cool or fun. I'm just interested, but it solves a problem. Like it's,
Right.
I bought a Garmin watch recently for some different fitness things I'm doing. And you're like, did I need that? No, but did it actually solve something that I was trying to do? Yeah. And that's how people spend money. And so I would say most founders, brands, organizations that are having a hard time with their message is because of the fact that they're not cutting through all the noise with communicating, well, this is what we help clients fix or solve or do, or the challenge we help them overcome. And usually by just simply shifting your message to talking about the problem that your audience has makes a pretty significant change in your kind of overall impact to your audience or your network that you have.
Probably the hardest shift
that
I've had to get people in for their marketing was to just focus on the problem and get people talking about it. How do you help them with making that mental shift to like talking about the problem?
Yeah. I mean, it is a tough mental shift, I think, for a lot of people. I think when you're able to use like the StoryBrand framework, and for those that aren't familiar with it, look it up, and it's a great framework. But essentially, the StoryBrand framework starts with like the hero of the story, and that's not you. Like reality is nobody's interested. If you've ever watched a movie, read a book, seen a story play out, the story is not usually about the kind of the guide that helps the person with the problem. The story is usually the person with the problem overcoming that problem, right? And so when you kind of really can communicate what that is to different people that you're, different agencies or organizations or brands that you're helping them with, when they can make that mental shift, it is really powerful because they stop talking about themselves and they start talking about their hero that they're trying to communicate with. And, the hero has a problem. That problem is usually an external thing they're trying to fix, but generally an external thing that you're trying to fix makes you feel a certain way inside. Could be fearful, could be overwhelmed, it could be, any sort of emotions. And so then you're being introduced to the guide that's going to help you lead that out of, lead you out of that, which that guide has to be the brand, has to be the organization that, is going to help you fix the problem. And there's some different downstream steps to that of how are they going to help you with that and what's that call to action, and that's going to drive success, all that kind of stuff. But I would say the more that you can shift, one of my superpowers is being able to be in the buyer's shoes. And so being able to stop, my brain can go, oh, what's the experience like for the buyer? And I would say the more you can figure that out and have somebody in your organization or yourself, be able to kind of be in the buyer's shoes of what's the experience they're having of interacting with with my brand or with this brand, and that usually solves a lot because most of the time we've drank in our own Kool-Aid for so long that we really don't know what it's like to not have all the knowledge that we do, and what it's like for the first time a prospect or a lead or an individual would even come in contact with your brand. And so I think that mind shift, can it takes a little while sometimes, but the people that really want to grow their brand are looking for ways they can have a mindset shift to kind of solve some different challenges they're having. So
yeah, you're definitely more open to it.
Yeah.
I guess in your superpower of putting yourself in the buyer's shoes, did that just come across naturally, just over time, doing different things in the business world? Are there books you read that got you kind of already thinking differently, and then you just went and explored? How'd you kind of acquire that skill?
That's a good question. I mean, probably all the above. I would say like early on, I've kind of had the disease of being an entrepreneur, and I say disease because sometimes it's annoying. I've had that disease, or whatever you want to call it, for a lot of years, and I can remember it all the way to growing up, and I grew up on a Christmas tree farm, which is kind of weird, but Christmas trees do grow somewhere. 100 acres was, my family ran the Christmas tree farm. And I remember early, like before I was 10, playing this game with my dad about product ideas. And it could be as simple as we're going to host a car wash, a lemonade stand, right? Like simple. And my dad would just ask me, well, who are you going to sell it to? Like, what do you, like, you have a car wash, who's going to come to your car wash? And then he'd push to like, go, well, what do they look like? What kind of cars do they drive? Do you want to wash small cars or big cars? And then he'd ask, well, how are you going to sell them? Like, how are you going to sell them into it? Well, how are you going to get their money from them kind of concept? Obviously he phrased it more of a game to talking to like a 9-year-old or whatever. But I would say like that motion early on in my life was really helpful, as I've just had, I probably have 2 to 5 ideas a day of products you could launch or businesses you could start. And I will play that game now. I still do. And I have for years and years and years, where you're like, okay, I have this idea and it's this AI product and it could do this and I could do that with it. And then I could tie it in this way. And this is how it would play out. All right, who's going to buy that? Okay, how would I sell it to them? You just kind of go down that path. And the more you do that, it sounds really weird, but I'll be riding a stationary bike. I'll be out for a walk. I'll be doing something else completely. And I'll just be thinking about it. And that's how my brain processes it. And so that helps me like actually put myself in the buyers or the audience's shoes a little bit easier, because I'm playing out what it would look like to actually interact with a brand that's doing that, because I'm just going through that repetition. So I don't know if I explained that very well. I haven't really thought through how that's like the trench that's been ingrained in my mind.
Yeah. I think it's so something I've been doing lately is copy working.
Okay.
Where you grab all those great ads and just handwrite them. And like I'd done this in college, did it at some point, but like, let's just do that again. Right. Start handwriting. And I'm realizing that as I'm like writing out some of these great ads, it's like you're spotting, oh, they use like this word 3 times, in this paragraph. Like, why did they do that? And you start like actually questioning all these things. But just the act of like taking 30 minutes in the morning to do that, I feel is making me way more aware of everything else. And so I think similarly, you just thinking about these ideas and working through them means when you go into a client call, it's like, it's just easy. It's second nature to be able to spot the patterns and everything. And so
it's like the study. I think like if you study buyer behavior, you study sales calls, you study whatever you are or whatever you want to, rarely is it everything that is impacting someone, but most of the time, like if you listen to a 30-minute sales call, there's like 2, maybe 3 pivotal moments that happen in the call. And it could be a story that's being communicated. It's just like that aha moment that the prospect is having. And those are the things that I'm always studying. Like I'm looking for those. I'm looking for, wait, hold on, back up 15 seconds. Something shifted, something changed. And you're trying to pay attention to questions you ask and all that kind of stuff. But reality is like you and I can go back and forth on questions all day long, and they're not going to really change, like be massively impactful. And so like, how do you study? And same thing with you, like, okay, rewriting word, you're like, okay, which are the words that are used often? Okay, what do we think is like the most, like the pivotal moment in this ad or this copy or this whatever, where it's actually, getting traction, or it's, making a difference in that individual that's reading it. So I think if you start to study or lean into those types of things, many people are really trying to figure out what's the exact word I should use, or the phrase I should use, or the question I should ask. And you're kind of going, yeah, sure, those are obviously really important. But at the same standpoint, more so looking into what's the kind of pivotal change moments that individual buyers are having, and figuring out how do you uncover those, in your own brand.
So with the StoryBrand, there is a formula to help people actually follow it and get some clarification or clarity within their message. Sentence took me for a ride.
Well, you start anytime you say formula, I think it's like, how do I stumble through this?
How do you kind of use the formula without creating a message that sounds formulaic?
Yeah. Good question. A long time ago, when I ran an agency for a decade, and 7 of those years we were StoryBrand certified. And so we did, 300 plus workshops with people, brand scripts with people, maybe more than that. But pretty early on, we realized that the StoryBrand messaging kind of framework was more of a messaging filter than it was a formula to like just kick out this word or this sentence. And the reason I say that's because so often when you're working with an organization and you're really kind of like trying to understand, like, okay, who's the hero of their story, who's the audience they're selling to, who the, like that ideal client profile or that persona or whatever word you want to use, and then what's the problem they have, and okay, how do we then empathetically talk about their the brand's ability to connect with the prospect, and what's the authority they would then have to like actually be able to solve that problem. And you're kind of working through all the different characteristics, the 7 different parts of the StoryBrand framework. But then you kind of have to go, all right, the same sentence doesn't work in an email that works on a homepage, that works on a paid ad, that works on a, whatever, a speech on stage, or like it's not the same exact words. And so then you have to kind of go, okay, so how do we figure out how to use this as a filter to like go, hey, if we're ever saying something to our audience, it needs to run through this filter. Like, are we talking to our audience? Are we talking about the problem they have? Are we position ourselves as the kind of guide or the, person that can help, lead them out of their problem or their challenge? Are we using it as a filter? And so I'd say probably in the work that I've done with it and what I know about the StoryBrand framework, really understanding the why behind each different element of the formula is probably just the most important part. One is for any agency or marketing guru out there, like it's probably the fastest way that I've found to get up to speed with a brand. So if you're trying to work with them, or you're just starting with them or whatever, and you probably have a discovery process of some way, shape, or form, I would say it is one of the fastest ways to get up to speed, like I say, with that brand and what they're doing, products they sell, challenges they have, or that they're solving, those types of things. And so using it as like a filter is probably been the easiest I've found to not have, which is that it's like everything's like art and science, right? There's a combo of both of them in everything. So you've got like the science of the formula, right? And kind of digging into each different section, understanding the why. And then you have the art of, okay, what's the actual implementation or execution you're trying to do, and using the StoryBrand kind of framework as that filter. So I don't know if did that make sense at all? I feel like it was a non-linear explanation, but
that was good. I pulled out a handful of notes from that one. So.
Okay.
So I guess jumping back towards just agency life.
Yeah.
What's the one domino you would say an agency needs to knock this down to make everything else in their lives easier?
If you could figure out what problem that you solve, I think that probably is going to make your life easier. Because reality is that kind of you're kind of known for one thing. Like, even like I'm a generalist. I know a lot of different things and I kind of go deep on a few. But like for the most part, if you want me in your organization, I'm going to create momentum. Like that's all you need to remember. And that is, so I've kind of, honed in on a bit of a problem that I help people fix. And that's kind of to help people get unstuck and to help create momentum in their organizations. And so, but it's taken me years to figure out how do I describe that, because I am a generalist. It's really easy if you're a specialist and all you do is this and you're dedicated your whole life to it. Like, great, that's the problem you fix. But anyway, I feel like that's the thing that people should chase after is what's the problem that they actually fix for people. There's a lot of aspects to being able to like narrow down what that kind of problem, how do you get there, and is it relevant to the marketplace, and do people actually want to buy it, and all those types of things. And that's all part of it. But I feel like once you have the problem or clarity on the problem that you solve, kind of everything downstream from that, your offers, your positioning, your pricing, your pitch, all those types of things are much more clear. But if you can't articulate your problem or kind of what you solve and whom you solve it for, you'll probably struggle to really scale most anything, because of the fact that you're not going to resonate super well, and you're going to be kind of spread thin and do a lot of different things. So that's, I mean, if I were to pick one, I'd say that's the thing that's probably the most valuable to chase down and actually articulate.
Yeah. We have very similar answers for that one. So
nice.
Good.
Either both of us are wrong, or we have good companies. Either way. So,
all right. I got 2 questions as we wind down. First being, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
I mean, I can't recommend the StoryBrand, building a StoryBrand book enough. There's a new version that came out this year, Building a StoryBrand 2.0. Highly recommend that. If you're building an agency and you're more on the creative side, less on the business side, and haven't scaled a business or something before, I'd recommend reading Traction by Gino Wickman. Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, big name that's out there. But if you don't have a way, like a framework that you're using to like operate your business, that's something to lean into. So those are two that I would recommend for sure. It's interesting because I listen to or read books all the time, every month, and there's lots of them. There are tactical things, there's sales questions, there's hiring things, there's team building things, there's manager things, there's leadership things. I would argue that for most kind of creatives or people in agency land that after navigating it, my response really is read books and get around content that helps you understand who you are as an individual and confidently believe in yourself. Because most people have a hard time selling their service because they're not confident that their service or that themselves can help that person. They're kind of like, I think we can help you. Like, you're kind of like, they're almost like ducking. And so, yeah, you've got all the tactical things, you've got all the sales questions. I would argue that there's a lot of books now that are out there that if you ask the question of some sort of AI service, you're going to learn it just as fast, if not faster. The thing you can't learn from AI is really who you are as an individual. You might be able to have words that are put to it. AI can help you with that, but who you are as an individual, and then how do you like approach different situations with confidence? So I think that's probably falls into like the psychology, self-help, leadership type kind of genre more than anything else. But if I look back on the last like 15 years, probably those books have been the most impactful for me comparatively to, sure, I'll pick things out of other, books that are more tactical, but yeah, that'd be my answer.
Awesome. Taking this full circle.
Yeah.
I have like no constraints on this question. And so the answers vary incredibly. I'm wondering if I did add a couple of constraints, what would happen?
Yeah.
Last question. Where can people find you?
Yeah. I'm probably the most active on LinkedIn, on any like social platforms. We've got a community that we're building called Agency Builders. So agencybuilders.com is a great way to kind of find that. It's basically just fostering a community of people that are doing similar things and running in all the same directions and have similar questions and that kind of stuff. So check that out. And then I work at StoryBrand. I run the revenue team at StoryBrand. And so feel free to reach out to StoryBrand. But those are kind of probably the best places to find me.
Awesome. All right, Tyler, thanks for joining.
Yeah, man. Fun to see you.
Too. That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.